Frank Lloyd Wright, Master Marvel or Simple Countryman?
Frank Lloyd Wright was a master marvel. He created over 1,141 works, which he built 532 of, and 409 are still in existence today. For example, his creation of falling water.
Wright was an innovative person. He not only built and designed houses, he designed furniture. He also came up with the idea of the carport.
Wright would influence architecture for more than 70 years, which would then influence the architects of today.
His life was stranger than any average person. One reason was that he lived 93 years. Another reason his life was not ordinary was that he lived on the edge of disaster. He was a trouble hound. He couldn't live simply or sensibly or even legally. He was always in trouble, always deeply in debt. His life started with a lie, a changed birthday from 1867 to 1869. Family records indicate that he was christened Frank Lincoln Wright when he was born in Richland Center, Wisconsin on June 8, 1867. When he was younger, he ran away from home twice. His first work as a youth was to assist the architect of a newly family chapel, and his first building as a professional was for the Hillside Home School established and ran by his aunts. There were dark complications in his long life. Again and again it was battered by death and madness. One for the simplest reasons, for the strangest of his life, was that he was an extremely annoying man. What type of person was he? He was a fussy, vain, and loudmouth person. He was certain that he was genius, smart, handsome, and something near to a saint. He was eager to tell anyone, everyone, about his magnificent self. The most important reason Frank Lloyd Wright was so strange was that he had a massive personality. He was a genius, the most talented, original, and inventive architect of our country, perhaps any country, has ever produced. He was born after the Civil War and of most of his century to see early computers, airliners, atomic energy, satellites, and rockets getting ready to head to the moon, the most radical changes in human history. His bright, extravagant life wound its way through half a dozen wars, major natural catastrophes, astonishing discoveries, international financial collapses, and scientific upheavals. His values were conservative, straight-laced, deeply old-fashioned, and enthusiastically original, and came directly from the Lloyd Jones family, and they were values common to the Welsh settlers of the area. The last part of the 19th century was the high point of the Romantic revolt against 18th century rationalism, and the idea he would hold on for the rest of his life were radical Romantic ideas. Weymouth was the first town that Frank Lloyd Wright remembered, at least the first he wrote about. He was 7 years old when he moved there. On April 24th, 1885, the court ruled that William C. Wright had indeed discharged his obligations to his wife. His son would never see his father again. There is little doubt that Wright's kindergarten experiences were every bit crucial to enthusiastic development as he later worked with Louise Sullivan. The virtues of nature and the relationship of nature, art, and morality, concepts that were inseparable from the 19th century mind, appeared over and over in Wright's pronouncements. To maintain his Olympian position as the self-described inventor of the modern architecture, He could admit to not other interests or influences, or acknowledge any other work but his own. Japanism was a major 19th century taste that affected almost everything visible, movable, wearable, or fashionable, which led right to Japanese art and the woodblock prints that became so much a part of his own art and life. His abstract shapes and stylized forms of the moral and aesthetics that were the main point of Wright's attitude. The abstract shapes and stylized natural forms were always artistic, with the overarching symbolism dear to the Victorian age's moral evolent principles. The aesthetic movement was ready for the change in Wright's childhood. It decreed a new era of enlightenment, artistic design, and home decoration. Frank Lloyd Wright's early years were nomadic and unsettling. Before he was 11, he lived in 6 towns in 4 states, from Massachusetts to Iowa, while restless rather searched for a better situation. In his early teens, he worked summers to supplement family income, and where his parents divorced, he left high school to take a job. He lied about little things and big things, designs, expenses, schedules, ideas, friends, and family. He tricked his clients and hid important things from them. He told his clients a house would cost $10,000 when he knew it would cost more than $100,000. He claimed to have all the drawings of a building done when he hadn't even begun. He ignored his clients' ideas, wouldn't answer their letters and calls, and disappeared for months at a time. He would borrow money from them. Throughout his long life, he always was in debt. He bought groceries, hired carpenters and servants, bought fancy cars, had expensive suits made, and didn't pay for years, sometimes never. Sheriffs appeared with handcuffs and warrants, but he enchanted them somehow, and they went back to jail without him. His bank account always insisted that he was poor, yet traveled the world like a glittering prince. He started college, but after 2 unproductive semesters, he moved to Chicago, where he worked for 3 employers in a year. A week before his 22nd birthday, he married his 18-year-old fiancée, his first romantic attachment. By the mid-20s, he acquired the social and agricultural credentials necessary to become an upper-middle-class professional. Letting his imagination wander, he began to develop creative abilities, learning early into life the meaning of independence and personal responsibility. Wright received additional experience during 1886 from a source close to the Lloyd Jones family, Joseph Lyman Silsby, a prominent Chicago architect of Queen Anne residence, designed All Souls Church for Wright's Uncle Jenkins in June 1885. Whenever his occupational situation, his first few months in Chicago proved to be excellent training for Wright.
Frank Lloyd Wright quotes, "I believe a house is more of a home by being a work of art." Wright's house remains his favorite building types from the start of his career until the end 70 years of his architect. He saw a house as an individual freedom. He believed a house was the center of a family life. His house took a variety of amazing forms. Wright designed over 300 different houses in his career as an architect. The first house he built was his own. He borrowed money from his employer to build it. It was a shingled cottage located in the Chicago suburb of Oak Park in 1889 to 1890. The house was a Queen Anne style. It had a variety of shapes. The wool shingles covered the walls very tightly. The visual exterior of the house was all shapes, triangles, rectangles, circles, semicircles, diamonds in the windows, and octangular bays. The first floor was hid by high walls and shrubs. The entrance door was off-center. This house was his architectural laboratory for 2 decades. The Charnley House was the second house he designed in 1891 in Chicago for James Charnley. Wright designed this lumberman client a brick and stone house with wood interior. The house had 3 horizontal bases, centered shafts, and a capital on top. It was mainly flat wall. The house had only one opening, the door. The windows were covered by decorations. The Charnley residence was a truly sculptural block of house. The Winslow House was built by Wright in 1893 for William Winslow. It was located in the suburbs of River Forest, Illinois. This was his first house on his own, departing from Allender and Sullivan. This house took a new look for the classical column. It was a tree rooted in nature. This house was a Roman brick villa. It was a leafy terracotta and sheltered by a broad roof as protective as overhanging branches. Wright regarded this house as beginning of his prairie period. The Moore House was built by Wright in 1895 for Nathan and Ann Moore. The house was located on the same street as Wright's. This was an English Tudor house. Wright used narrow Roman bricks with an open porch. The house had many shapes, tall chimneys that sliced through the roofs, and some Japanese exotic art forms. It was a house that Moores wanted, but Wright felt it to be a perplexing hybrid. The Heller House was built by Wright in 1896 for Isidore Heller. Located in Chicago, this house was shaped in bricks and mortar. It was simple, molded with rectangular lines, and sat on a narrow urban piece of property. It had overhanging roofs and a bold exterior. The entrance was hidden on the side of the house. It was a 3-story house and had very solid walls. It was a cold-looking house. The Thomas House was built by Wright for Frank Thomas. This was Wright's first prairie house, built in his own hometown of Oak Park. The windows in the house were filled with glass artwork. The main living area was on the 2nd floor. The 1st floor was the basement. The walls were made as a stucco, and the entrance was a cave-like arch. This house was very private and full of light all at the same time, because of the basement being on the 1st floor.
The Fricke House was built by Wright in the 1900s. This house was a horizontal and vertical design. It looked like it had wings and a 3-story tower in the center. The walls were made of stucco. It had a built-in porch and a 2-story garage. The center of the house provided most of the interior light from the vast number of windows. The Dana Thomas House was built by Wright for Susan Lawrence Dana. It was built in Illinois, and the house was a prairie palace built for the wealthy widow to entertain. It was a classic Italian family home. It glistened with its custom glass and custom furnishings. The roofs were copper-edged and looked of Japanese architecture. The bricks were cream white. This house is now a museum owned by the state of Illinois. The Darwin Martin House was built by Wright in 1904 for Darwin and Isabella Martin in Buffalo. It was made of red brick, and it was built around a garden. It was very hard to tell where the building began. The windows swung outward to embrace the outdoors, the upper walls vanished under the eaves, and the exteriors of the house were decorated with concrete planters and a pagoda birdhouse. The Roby House was built by Wright for Frederick Roby in Chicago. It was a great ship of bricks cutting through the landscape. The house had many decks and was 3 stories high. The windows were hard to see, for they were placed in the back in the brick walls. The house was built for privacy and security. The Tallison House was built by Wright for himself in Wisconsin. He was moving on from a prairie-style house to new exotic designs. It looked like it was on a hill, but really was not. Its walls were rustic limestone. The roofs were tinted to mimic the surrounding hills. Tallison grew to be 600 acres, including farm buildings, a dam, a powerhouse, and a windmill. This masterpiece burned down along with Wright's mistress and her 2 children. The house was rebuilt at a later date. The Bach House was built by Wright, located in Milwaukee. It was a townhouse on a narrow lot with a Central American and Japanese style. The house was made of cast concrete with a central screen of windows. The windows were narrow with slits of art glass. The entrance was to the left of the four-square house to preserve the street-side symmetry. The Hollyhock House was built by Wright in California for an oil heiress. It was a Toltec, Aztec, Mayan, and Incan structure. The U-shaped stucco house was reinforced by concrete. It was extremely plain on the outside and extremely fancy on the inside. The water pools around the house were to bring coolness to the structure.
La Miniatura House was built by Wright in Pasadena for Alice Mallard. This house was made of concrete that Wright had cast with distinctive patterns and stacked to make walls inside and out. They were called textile blocks. The perforated blocks allowed light into the house. The top of the house was a balcony from the bedroom. The Freeman House was built by Wright in Los Angeles. It was a modern-day fossil impressed within fallen plants. It was a cube formed and surrounded by plants and trees. It had 12,000 blocks and glass placed in the blocks. Glass windows slid around the corners of the house to make the walls evaporate. Today this treasure is in danger. The Northridge earthquake caused extensive damage to the structure. It has been under renovation for a number of years now. The Wright-Jones House was built by Wright in Oklahoma for his cousin Richard Lloyd Jones. This house was made of concrete blocks, but glass was the main material. It was a house without walls. The windows were structured in steel. The roof was flat and simple. It was a glass house. The Taliesin West House was built by Frank Lloyd Wright in the desert in Scottsdale, Arizona. The house was built off of huge boulders of sandy concrete and wooden frames. The wood sloped inward and outward. The roof was made of tungsten canvas. This house looked like a luxurious tent. The Sturgis House was built by Wright in Los Angeles. It was a perfect tree house. There was a balcony around the entire house. The siding was a rustic red wood, and the siding also was used for a canopy over the balcony. The Cedar Rock House was built by Wright in Iowa, overlooking the Wapsipinicon River. Wright angled the space 30 degrees off the stem of the house to frame the views up and down the river. The house had many glass walls and cornered windows to make the walls disappear. There were holes in the concrete roofs to let light in. The house was mainly brick. A boathouse was built below the house. The Friedem House was built by Wright in Michigan. This house was built for a toy maker, and it was the most inventive. This house was circular and made of stone. A carport to the left looked like a flying saucer hovering over the house. This two-story house was unified by a stone wall. The house was wrapped in windows. The Harold Pierce Sr. House was built by Wright in Phoenix's Paradise Valley. This was Wright's most daring residence, an oasis. It had an open atrium on two sides. The roof was coppered edged, and the walls were of concrete blocks that pyramided upward.
The Rayward House was built by Wright in Connecticut. The windows were curved to catch the sunlight. The house is made of an ellipse, circle, square, modular, and rectangular concrete blocks. Water, rocks, and grenier surround this house. The Lake House was built by Wright in Phoenix. This house was steep and flat. It consists of circles. There were 2 observation towers. Windows were located at the top of the circles of the house and offered a panoramic view. The doors were made of glass. The house was surrounded by greenery.
Frank Lloyd Wright not only designed buildings, but he designed rooms too. He loved open areas for freedom of movement. Wright stated that homes should not be caves, but shelters. He felt that only the one room on the first floor of a house was needed. All necessary areas could be located in one huge room. Wright believed that the living room was the most important room in the house. It was the heart of the home. He felt the kitchen, bedrooms, servants' quarters, etc. should be hidden. Wright liked to see one end of the house to the other. He simplified family life with his simplified rooms. In the Roby house, the living room was on the second floor. The room was very spacious and plain, but rich-looking. The chairs were all lined in a row. The room was in earth tones, mainly browns and gold. The lights shined down on the carpet to capture the pattern of the carpet. It helped reflect the interior theme. The windows were designed to decorate the room and add to the horizontal patterns of the area. The Taliesin Great Room was an architectural experiment for Wright. He put limestone into the interior of the house to match the exterior. He was trying to bring the natural world of the universe inside. Sand colors were used to look like the riverbank. The windows opened to let sunlight and music from the birds. The living room in the little house towered over mortals below. The room had a number of beautiful windows. There were tall, long windows at the base of the room. Windows were placed above the lower windows, and the ceiling had windows. All the windows had patterns in them. Window seats lined up under the windows at the base of the room. The room was mainly wood and in earth tone colors. The living room was a very open and spacious room. The Hollyhock house had a room in which Wright turned architecture into romance. He called this room a natural room, free from form and native to the region. The room had a lot of built-in furniture, such as sofas, chairs, and tables. A skylight was placed in the ceiling. Underneath the skylight was a fireplace that Wright wanted to look like fire, water, earth, and air. Flowers and candles were placed in the room for romance.
In the La Miniature house, Wright turned to concrete for interior walls. He developed his own interlocking system of precast blocks. The blocks offered integral ornament to the room. Once again, earth tones were used in the room. The living room had a balcony above it. The floor was made of concrete and decorated with oriental rugs. The room looked Japanese. The store living room was made of wood and concrete. Wright wove the walls with 11 distinctive patterns. All patterns were made of overlapping squares. The concrete walls looked like sand. The ceiling and floor in the room were made of wood. A terrace was built in the room so that Los Angeles and Hollywood could be seen. Wright, in the mid-1930s, had to deal with the cost for his rooms. He called his solution Usonian. To reduce the cost of labor and materials, Wright's Usonian houses relied on geometric modules or plans and standardized components. In the Hannah's living room, Wright tried a new module, a hexagon. The fireplace, a stepped brick hearth, grates, footstools, built-in benches, and seatbacks were all hexagons. The room was mainly red brick and wood. The style of the room was nicknamed honeycomb after a bee's honeycomb. The great room in the Taliesin West house looked like the inside of a ship. The ceiling was made of canvas pulled tightly between wood beams. The seats were part of the rock wall and went around the entire room. The windows were set in the room like portholes on a ship. The chairs were made out of shapes and the carpet was sandy white. Wright called this room wing spread, which meant a pinwheel whose four wings evolved around the center core as if it posed for flight. The room was 38 feet high and had 5 fireplaces, with a high brick chimney attached. There were tiers of windows around the entire room. A spiral staircase led to a glassed observation deck. Different types of barreled chairs were used throughout the room. The wood in the room was cleaned by Johnson Wax because the owner of the house was Herbert F. Johnson, president of the Johnson Wax Company.
Wright built a great room in Cedar Rock House, all parallel to the ground and a companion to the horizon. The roof was flat, all the furniture was built in. Large windows encased the entire room. Wood was everywhere, and greenery was used to allow the outdoors to come inside. In the Palmer House, the living room that Wright designed was stunning. The ceilings, the walls, the floors, the furniture were all the same color. The windows were 10 feet high from the floor. The fireplace brought warmth to the house. The playroom in R.C. Wright's house was circular. The room was made of brick, wood, and many windows. The carpet, fireplace, table, and chairs were all round. Bookcases were used for books and at work in the room. The playroom was one of Wright's busiest and fun designs. Wright's own dining room was simple but elegant. The room was encased in wood. The walls, ceilings, tables, chairs, and ceiling lights were all the same color wood. The windows had a pattern throughout the glass. The floor was made of brick. The room was dark. Wright called the lighting in the room moonlight. The dining room that Wright designed for the Holly Hawk house was small. It consisted of 2 wooden chests of drawers, a wooden table, and a chair. The chairs and the table blended right into the walls, due to the same color and shape. Tall windows provided light among the rectangular ceiling light over the table. The floor was carpet with suede texture. In the Smith house, the dining room area blended right into the living room area. Overhead lights filtered through geometrically cutouts into the wood ceiling. The area was small, just enough room to sit and eat. A kitchen that Wright designed was a small galley hidden away from the rest of the house. The natural materials made the room look richer than the actual budget. The cabinets were made of wood over veneer. The walls were brick. Everything was built into the wall.
The Annunciation Greek Orthodox Church in Wisconsin was one of Wright's most unique buildings. The design was a blue domed room. Under the roof lied the main sanctuary, a circular 2-level room that rested on 4 curved concrete piers forming a Greek cross within the circular plan. Windows of the stained glass brought light in over the balcony along the globes of artificial light. The main altar was able to be seen and was encased in a gold anodized aluminum enclosure. Churchgoers had the pleasure of sitting either next to the altar or on the second tier next to the dome.
Falling Water is the most famous modern house in America. It is located in a remote mountain site in southwestern Pennsylvania. It is a masterpiece and is recognized worldwide as an example of organic architecture. It is where a building becomes an integral part of its natural setting. Thousands of visitors come each year to see this masterpiece. In 1934, Edgar Kaufman Jr. became an apprentice to Wright. In 1871, Kaufman's father founded the Kaufman Store as we know today, a retail business offering ready-made men's clothing. During the end of 1934, his mother and father, Mr. and Mrs. Kaufman, visited their son and invited Wright back to Pittsburgh to discuss project ideas. One idea was a country house to replace a cottage that stood in Bear Run for over a decade that the Kaufmans had used. In 1913, Mr. Kaufman Sr. takes over the business and leases Bear Run out to employees as a summer and weekend camp. 15 structures had stood on the lot at this time: a clubhouse, small train station, several cottages, a dance pavilion, and a few other structures. In 1921, the Kaufmans built a cabin on Bear Run, 1,500 feet southeast of the falls. The Kaufmans bought land until they had 1,914 acres, enough to protect and conserve the watershed of Bear Run. In 1921, Frank Lloyd Wright came to Bear Run, where he looked at the building site and started formulating his plans. Wright returned to Taliesin, his studio in Spring Green, Wisconsin, and was sent a site survey in March of the following year, 1922, showing the stream, contours, major trees, and boulders. Wright thought about the land before writing anything down. Late September 1922, Wright received a call from Kaufman on a Sunday morning. Kaufman was leaving Milwaukee for Taliesin, a 2-hour drive. He did not have a single thing written down for the Kaufmans when he received the call. He drew the first 3 floor plans using different colored pencils. These plans that he drew were the main floor plans that he used to build Falling Water. Kaufman was surprised when he saw the plans. He expected the house to be built south of the falls, looking up at the falls. Rather, Wright had said that he wanted the waterfall to, quote, become an integral part of their lives. Kaufman allowed the house to move forward. Wright set the map so the house would be set at a 60-degree angle to the road and to the falls. The concrete piers were set perpendicular to the stream and parallel to the bridge, so that the house faced 30 degrees east, directly south. This was done so that a view of the house could be seen downstream. Some say that the design of the house is the, quote, answer to the international style of architecture that had been canonized in the 1932 Museum of Modern Art exhibition. Falling Water was built with the best aspects of all the houses that Frank had built up to this point. He put all of his best designs into this one house. During construction, Wright had changed his design many times. He said that working with the contractors and construction workers helped him formulate his design a little bit better. Wright was usually on scene when the house was being built, but as time went on, he was not able to be on scene all the time. He began relying on his apprentices to be on the build site to make sure everything went to plan. Preliminary plans were sent to Kaufman on October 15, 1935. The minimal cost of the house and furnishings was $35,000. The end cost of the house would be $75,000, with the cost of furnishings and completion. The guest house, garage, and servants' quarters added in 1939 added to the cost an additional $50,000. Final plans followed in March, and Kaufman had a sample wall built. He did not tell Wright that he was having the plans reviewed by his consulting engineers, who, from the start, were very doubtful about the reinforced concrete, which was new in houses in America. The reviews were sent to Wright, who then told Kaufman to return the drawings since he was not worthy of the house. Kaufman apologized and gave his approval for the drawings. He later had the engineer's reports buried in the wall near the dining table. Falling Water cantilevers over the rocks into nature, just like a tree. The branching terraces made of concrete poised daringly right over Kaufman's favorite waterfall in Mill Run. A center core of stacked sandstone, inset with windows with red frames, raised high to anchor the house to the valley. The hearth was carved from boulders already in place. The music of the stream played throughout the house. The terraces allowed the family and guests to stand over the waterfall as if they were standing on a rocky ledge. Glass walls on all the levels allowed for viewing of rocks and the forest. Most of the ceilings in the house were low. A pool was located outside the main bedroom. The front door was inconspicuous. A jet of water was built right next to the door to welcome you with a splash. A guest house was added in 1939. The terraces were made of concrete in a rhododendron color that blended well with the natural gray stone. The windows butted directly into rough walls. The engineers and Kaufman decided, without telling Wright, that they would put more steel in the first floor cement slab. The excess of steel caused the ground to lose strength that Wright had originally planned. This blunder has plagued the house since it was completed, causing cracks from the settling house. By early September, Wright had found out about the extra steel in the concrete on the first floor. He called his contractor back to Taliesin in disgrace and replaced him with the apprentice, Edgar Taffel. Frank attempted to create harmony with nature within the building of this house. In the living room there was a boulder that Wright had decided to cut flat, but when the Kaufman suggested that it was left, Wright agreed. The stone was flat on top, and the family had used it to picnic upon before the house was built. The restoration started because of a large part of the house was eventually going to tumble into the creek below. The main problem with the house from the beginning was the concrete beams that supported the massive living room, the 2 adjoining terraces, and the master bedroom. The terraces above were too weak for the weight it was supporting, so the beams began to sag. It took 5 years of planning and 4 months of actual labor to complete the renovations. The total repairs cost around $11.5 million. The funding for the project came from private, corporate, and government donations. No one ever held a grudge against Wright for the structural problems, because it was a very complex house, even though the original contractors did not follow Wright's plan correctly and second-guessed his intelligence. Wright's idea of architecture was that architecture should be organic, or that it should be appropriate to time, place, and man. Time is that a building belonged to the time it was built in. Place should be that it should be in harmony with its natural environment, when possible, taking advantage of natural features. And man, as a building's first mission is to serve people. Reality of the building is the space within to be lived in, not the walls and ceiling, often quoted by Frank Lloyd Wright. Wright's attitude toward nature was that nature was a study of inner principle, not looking at, but within. He was very conservative. He designed his millwork details and furniture to be cut in long rectangular pieces that used every piece of lumber that was cut, so that there would be minimal waste. His furniture was designed to be an integral part of the interior. Screens and grills are in simple lines that declare a simplicity that he believed important to modern buildings. He changed the concept of post and beam construction. He pulled away posts from the building, and walls became features in the building. Features were screens grouped about the interior space. This great truce in architecture is what Wright called the destruction of the box. Now architecture could be free. Frank Lloyd Wright also designed furniture. His later designs were made of plain materials such as plywood. He designed them to be moved around in the room to make new conversation clusters. The upholstery and cushion accents should reflect the outside nature inward, to bring nature inside, just as Frank Lloyd Wright often does. Frank Lloyd Wright spent much of his career trying to find ways to simplify construction. He designed ready-cut components for a house. His goals were to eliminate as much on-site labor as possible. The houses were factory-made and shipped in sections and built on-site. Heating, lighting, and plumbing systems were consolidated for easy installation. His concept was attempted on 20 homes, but became too expensive and was abandoned. Frank Lloyd Wright was the first person to invent the carport. He became tired of the garage's gaping hole in the front of the house. A carport will do with liberal overhead shelter and walls on two sides, quotes Frank Lloyd Wright. The carport saved his clients the cost of a garage, and guaranteed the car would become an integral part of the house's design. Frank's houses were built for change to either add or subtract children or activities. Bedrooms could be added or removed, courtyards added or removed. Screen-light, no-weight-bearing walls could be added or removed to increase or decrease the number of rooms that were in a house. Barred and batten walls and the unit construction of Wright homes facilitated these easy alterations. Wright felt architecture should reflect modern life and modern needs. His then innovative single-story, open-plan system helped a mother keep an eye on her children as she cooked. And it is because his designs reflected such basic human needs that, even a half-century later, a home such as the Massaro House still works today.